Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you here today, especially after yesterday's party. There's like 40 of you in the room. That's 39 more than I expected because of the party and because at the same time there is the speech by CEO of Larian Studios. So it's even better for you. What a way for you to start Digital Dragons than coming to our speech and listening to two nerds talking about pipelines. So we can start. My name is Jakub Kościelniak, and this is my colleague Karol Kowalczyk, and we are the pipeline engineers working currently on Polaris, the next installment in the Witcher saga. The topic for our presentation is DevOps for artists, optimizing workflow with asset pipeline teams. But before we start, let's look at us for 2 more seconds. And let's briefly look at the agenda. First, we'll talk about why automation is a real gain and how you can save some time by automating your tools. Then we'll talk about smaller and bigger tools you can develop at your companies. And at the end, we'll share our key experiences that we've learned during the development process. So, why should we automate processes? So, what's the point of this presentation? There are 2 main reasons. First of all, we want to build the awareness of the importance of having a dedicated pipeline teams in your companies. In Poland, only a few game dev companies have a dedicated pipeline team. Obviously, CDPR has one, Platish has one, and probably most of other biggest AAA companies have one. Still, asset pipeline is not a very popular team in the industry. The second reason is that we want you to start thinking about how can you save some time by automating tedious tasks and in the long run make your life a bit easier. Why should you even care? You may think that your company does not have dedicated resources for their pipeline team. The issue is it's not about pipeline team. It's about automation of tasks you have to do manually. It can be very annoying to repeat any manual tedious task over and over again that can be done automatically in the code. The easiest example is FIFO management. Imagine that you are working on some assets. Each time you finish your work, you have to remember to save your assets and add them to perforce manually. It can get very tedious and you may forget about this. During this presentation, we'll try to prove to you that you can save some time automating some such easier tasks and make your life easier and in the long term you save some time. We'll show you some tool examples that we developed for our artists to make their life easier. So let's think of a world in a big AAA company when there is no dedicated pipeline team and you happen to be a new animator. After you install your dedicated software like Maya or Motion Builder, you want to start working. There comes the first issue: how to get all necessary Maya or Motion Builder plugins into the software. To make your life more difficult, you don't know anything about coding. Fortunately, one friend from your team approaches you and helps you set everything up, which takes half a day, maybe more. Now you want to start working on your first animation, your first assignment. And you actually manage to finish it. So you save it happily, and happily submit it to perforce, obviously manually. But there is an issue, because nobody told you about you have to meet some standards. So you didn't know that the animation can be that long, that the one you created, or maybe you didn't know you have to add some metadata tags to one of the takes or the nodes. So you have to come back to that animation, reopen it, fix the issues, resave it, and add it again to perforce, obviously manually. After half a year, you're a proud member of a team. You created over 100 animation files, each one of them production ready. Unfortunately, it turns out for you that is the worst day in your company so far. The rigging team approaches you and says that they are changing every rig in the game. So you have to spend your next few days opening every single animation file one by one, resaving it, retargeting it, then resaving it, and adding them manually one by one to perforts. But this is only an imagination. All of the issues mentioned earlier would not be present if that company had an asset pipeline team. Funny enough, I forgot to click. So this was supposed to be in the background of the story. So what do we do? What is asset pipeline team? Funny enough, this is a question we get asked a lot. What does asset pipeline team do? It's very similar to a question, what do I do for a living? And when I'm asked this question, I usually ask back, what do you think I do for a living? And the answers I receive are different depending who I'm speaking with. When I'm speaking with my friends from CDPR, most of them, usually from the development side, can say, well, what does asset pipeline team do? My friends from outside of CDPR would say that I code in games. My parents would say that I code. Meanwhile, my grandma was just surprised that I can make a living by clicking a keyboard. Summing up this really prolonged introduction and answering the question. We are the team supporting processes of creating various assets, providing exporters, utility tools, asset databases. We automate setup for every DCC software, making them easily launchable with all of the tools necessary for work inside. Moreover, we serve as the first contact point for artists when they encounter any code or process-related issue or bug.
And now it's time for me to start encouraging you to building your own asset pipeline teams, or maybe simply letting one team member, whether he's an artist or a programmer, to start learning to automate those things and maybe just create a small submission from time to time. I know you may have different budgets and you may think that this is an overrated thing, you don't need that. And in fact, probably a lot of you think so, because while in IT, it's normal that there is a dedicated DevOps team that automates all those nuances and repetitive tasks for programmers. But wait a minute, we're game dev. Many of us has twice as many artists as programmers, and we do have some DevOps team, yet we don't automate stuff for artists. And it's not about taking their jobs away. It's about automating things they don't like or that make them make mistakes so they can focus on creative process. And honestly, it's not that hard. Like for me, my first task was to automate creating materials, because we had about 10 or 20 meshes, but we had to create 20 variants for each of them. That's already 400 materials, and it was so easy to create a mistake. So I did spend 2 hours on making a script and 1 hour fixing bugs. And in the middle of the day, I had nothing done, honestly, and everyone was surprised. But when we started launching the script, and you know, it was a very basic script. It was clicking on the screen. It wasn't even interacting with engine itself. It was running for 2 hours. So if I was doing that job, it would take me a whole day. And after 1 or 2 days, a developer came to me and they told me that, you know, we are working on this new physics system and we have to test it, and you have to modify all those materials. Would be even better if you created them from scratch. So as you can guess, instead of spending a whole day automating this stuff, I was making coffee whole day, because I did have to monitor this automation. It was simple, it was prone to bugs, and I had to run it manually. So what I did was make a coffee, run the script, go to other team, ask what they are working on, go pet the pet, because our rendering programmer had a dog, and then I would come back to my computer, see that 10 meshes were done, and run another batch. And that's really it. But that was a single case, and that probably made my life and maybe my colleagues' life easier, but not whole artist team. And we would like to create tools that are not only easy to create and to maintain, but that would be also used on future projects, that they would save our money for years. So let's think about Artists' Day when they start at 8 p.m. and they probably want to start working on some asset. Maybe it's some characters, maybe generic or something. But yesterday your friend submitted a new update, and now you have some references to be updated in Perforce. Unfortunately, you completely forgot about it, so you started working on it. You want to submit the file, and you have an information that there is a newer version. So just creating a simple widget that pops out and asks you if you want to to update those files already helps you and saves you some hour or two of wasted time. And our artists really liked it. They didn't want to use Perforce Helix anymore. Going through that whole application with version control is a lot of learning for a newcomer, especially if you were maybe just a student and didn't have a chance to work with commercial software like Perforce. So we created our own widget, and that is the one for Maya. It shows you lists of assets, revisions. You can filter them. Maybe go to your favorite animations folder on the left side, and that's it. We have a similar one for Motion Builder. They are totally different softwares, I would say, even though they are made by the same company and they have the same file format, at least the output file format. But they were different. So the UI is also made to suit animators' need rather than character modelers or environment artists. But the things, the guts that are inside are actually the same code. And when we were making the first widget that was synchronizing things with Perforce, we had to figure out how to connect to version control, how to select proper workspace, sync the files. So we already had everything done. And if you start thinking about dividing those guts into chunks that can be shared, it will make your life easier in future. Once you put some time into developing this single part, the next one will be easier. And what is more, it's pretty software agnostic and also project agnostic. When we started working on Phantom Liberty, there were some changes to our workspace, but we didn't have to throw everything to the garbage bin. And now when we are working on Polaris, we are actually using the same tech. So that's been with us for, I guess, at least 7 years, and multiply that with a few hundred artists who worked with us and who have to spend few hours each day creating new assets. So that is already a real gain, and it could be made with a single developer. And he doesn't really have to be some Python programmer, C++ programmer. If he's an artist and he's willing to learn basics of Python and creating widgets, that's all you need. But then it's not just about Perforce. It's also about combining those softwares. You create model in Maya, then you send it to Motion Builder, you create a nice animation with your motion capture team, but at the end of the day, you still want to export it to Maya and then to Engine. And even though these two are similar softwares, they work with FBX format, the animation works different in those. And we may have different rigs, we may have different root bones. So we created an application so user doesn't have to create that setup when he exports, selects everything, moves it to Maya, makes sure that animation is retargeted, maybe to the root bone, that some animation keyframes are in place. Everything is done by a script. It takes 1 or 2 minutes for Maya to compute this stuff, and it's done. And they use it every day. And that's one of the tools they wanted us to port the first when we were moving to a newer version of Maya, and we had to switch to newer version of Python. So we've already been through a big part of an artist's day in CDPR, but then it's time to submit things to Unreal or maybe to Red Engine. You may make a lot of mistakes, maybe a wrong naming convention. You know, textures have to have specific naming, but then this naming is used to apply compression settings. So it is pretty important. Or maybe you have to take care of proper LOD groups in your mesh. If you make things wrong, it's fine if you notice it early. But sometimes it's noticed 1 week later, you don't have time to fix it, and amount of bugs just piles up. So if you create some validation early, it's gonna be great. And this one is actually from Blender, because it's a very simple UI, but later, during the presentation, we'll show you what we have in our Maya exporter. So, Kuba?
Yes, that's me. Tools mentioned up to this point are great for start. In the bigger AAA companies, you would need some more advanced tools. As mentioned earlier, one of the things that we do is providing setup for every artist in the company. And there's a lot of them. And most of them will be using Maya. Now add to that all of the projects we have to support, all of them requiring its own launch software configuration. We had to design a system that would solve all of our issues. So what would the perfect system look like? First of all, artists should not be required to do any action when launching the software. We want our artists to focus on the things they're the best at, which is modeling, modeling, animating, not coding. Second of all, artists shouldn't have an option to manually edit the pipeline. In the past, we had issues where artists would come to us and ask why is something not working for them. Later, it turned out that they manually edited the pipeline they shouldn't have, and some of the tools broke for them. 3, tools should be easy to test and develop. We shouldn't waste any time when creating a new testing launch environment for one of the softwares. And lastly, it should easily support other projects, teams, and configurations, which was probably our most important requirement. So we created a system named Package Delivery System. It allowed us to easily manage packages. Packages are every tool, plugin, maybe pip package you can use in one of the softwares. Packages can be exporters, utility tools, some validators, plugins. Each package was defined by the Python-like file, package.pds, visible on the screen. It consisted of 3 functions: package requirements, with the list of other packages that were necessary for that given package to work. Package build, which was responsible for deploying a package, building it to a given folder, predefined folder, and package apply, which was appending the package to the Python path environmental variable under a given key. It allowed us to easily test new package versions by simply overriding this Python path environmental variable. Each project and team could have its own required package configuration. The app closely connected to PDS was the executor. It was basically a software launcher. One launcher to rule them all. We take care a lot about user experience. So in order for the user to launch a software, they would need to select one of the softwares in the list, then pick a team configuration visible on the right, and press the big yellow Start Software button visible on the bottom. And all of the tools and plugins, basically packages, would be added to the launch environment and would be present in that DCC software. Another tool we provide is the pose library. It's a shared database of poses with quick access and simple loading and pasting. Created poses can be shared across multiple projects. It can be launched in both Maya and Motion Builder, supporting both softwares with the same UI. It's great for the user experience because the user has to learn only one tool to work. In order to achieve it, we support one unified pose format, .pose, which is supported by both Motion Builder and Maya, which is again great for the user experience. It is connected to Perforce, so the user has all of the latest poses that they can get. When the pose is saved, it will be also added to Perforce. Another thing we mentioned a bit earlier is the validation. In this case, we try to validate the pose very early. So if there is any error with the pose, we try to inform the user about it. We say what's the reason behind it, and we don't allow to save it, and we don't allow the pose to be added to perforce. And the pose library is one of our mostly used tools. In the story at the beginning, a new animator in the team had to retarget all of the animation files they created. Actually, this is a real problem. We have to provide tools to quickly retarget a big number of files. One of them is Mobu Retargeter. I will quickly try to show why it's very user-friendly. First of all, user has to select a rig. And if they fail to do so, if they select a file that is not an FBX, they get a warning and they cannot proceed any further. So we quickly eliminate the possibility of error by not allowing the user to move. Then the user selects an output folder and has an option to connect to perforce. So they can get the latest rig file, as well as after the retargeting process, they can add and check out the files into perforce. So the user is gathering files and starts the retargeting process. Each one of the files can have one of three statuses. Processed, which means the file retargeted successfully, waiting, that the file is waiting for retarget process, and failed, which is self-explanatory. The retargeting is done without the use of a batch farm. It has locally connected database. The best feature about this tool is the logger and visible progress. User can see anytime the status of every file, the progress that's been made, and see the reason why one of the files retargeted incorrectly. In this case, one of the files failed because in that particular file there was too many characters in the scene.
All right, there may be many things to patch, and sometimes you want to distribute it. We talked about retargeting, so let's change the topic a bit. Every one of you who is an artist probably made an LOD mesh in the past. If you are developers, you also had to work with them. In Unreal and many other engines, we start to use automations. We make manually LODs if we really need to get that detail, but other than that, we will probably generate them. Nice. But what if each character has many appearances, like here, and someone updates the shader that is used by all of them? The mesh didn't change, but the way it looked did. And now you should patch a few thousand assets on some machine, and you cannot do it on your computer. You will not be able to work for a week. Same goes with buildings. They are even bigger and take longer time to be processed. And then you create LODs for whole city districts, like in Cyberpunk. So if you want to do that manually, then you need some simple interface. If you want to automate a huge patch, then you just need a single JSON, like that one appearance job there. That's for a single asset, but you can create a JSON or any other script for something more advanced, and then it would be nice to distribute it. You could use cloud, or you can just use your own machines. You can have a build system for that, or you can just set up 5 computers manually. That's fine, that's how you start. It would be nice to be able to monitor it though. So if you are even an artist, you should get some interface that will tell you that your mesh is in the queue, so you are not wondering if something has crashed. But if it did actually crash, then you call us, and we have a nice log on the right side. And here, it is like 7 IDs, and it doesn't give you any idea of how many assets were processed, but please believe me, it was millions of jobs at some point. At some point, we were actually running batch for all characters and all appearances in the game every week or every few days at night, and it didn't take any developer's time. We also had some custom stuff in our engine, and we wanted to have control over it. So we had to work with exporters. But if you use Unity or Unreal, you also have to do that. There are so many plugins or tools on Blender, Maya, and other marketplaces that have to solve simplest issues, like remembering which assets were selected to be exported, so you don't have to manually pick them next time. So we created a so-called export item, and even though there are like 5 meshes, there is just a single item to be exported. That already has LODs assigned, so we take care for that. But if you need more, like collision materials, it would be nice to set it not in the engine, but in Maya. Because next time you want to change something or modify, if you go back to Maya and then to Unreal or Red Engine, you'll have to set all those things from scratch. If you keep it in Maya or Blender, you don't have to. You just click export and that's it. So we integrated Collision Manager into the exporter, and we also had few nice things like defaults for the users who don't want to export Red Engine format every time, or maybe always need FBX for Substance Painter. Other than that, we obviously had some validation. And if you are developing your own validator, it would be nice to keep in mind that if you make it configurable at the very beginning, it will be easier in future. When you start a new project, you will not have your pipeline defined. Like, you may not know what is correct amount of UVs or naming convention or the triangle count. So you should be able to disable or enable those per project. So make those little interfaces for each validator, and then you can configure it in any way, maybe in a JSON. And coming back to those small tools that are in this exporter, the collision thing started growing, and it wasn't only about defining what is the sound of collision, like is it wood or is it metal? We had to define if it should collide with NPCs, maybe with particles. Like if there is a small vase on a table, you don't want it to be taken into calculation of particle collisions. So we had that little manager. Very simple, but saves your time. There are also other things, like more predefined defaults for you, or chunk order, because our character team always loves changing chunk order or using it for their own purposes. We provide the basic functionality, and very often they create their own tools. Maybe they want specific chunks to do something that maybe will take some polygons into consideration. Like we had our own system for calculating distance from the body for each vertex on the cloth, so there was no body parts sticking through the jackets. And last but not least, LODs. You can have those in the engine, but it's nice if you can set some setting, like the object is small, it should be visible in LOD 0 from the very, very close distance, like 1 meter, and you want it to be saved, because next time you come back to Maya and export it, you would have to set everything again in Unreal. And now I would like to show you a tool that deserves a separate talk, and actually there is one. If you Google multi-layer in CD Projekt, you may find 1 or 2 conference videos on the YouTube. Because we made a whole system that started as a vision, and you may think that it was a risky decision because it was so huge. This little tool solves issue of painting textures in Mari or Substance Painter. Usually you have to bake textures. You were painting with materials in Substance. You had a great fidelity, like there was some garment and you could see all those little threads. And then you bake it, and you have to bake it to a 2K texture. So you thought, all right, we have to fix it and we have to keep performance in mind. So let's make this texture smaller, maybe 128, but let's make it a mask, and then assign some predefined material. And we created a whole system of materials that are layered, like in Substance Painter, and that's made deep in rendering code of our engine, but we had a separate manager for assigning and tweaking those materials. The greatest thing about it is the parity. We had same interface for Maya, for engine, and for Substance Painter. So you could get back to working on your mesh in Maya and start tweaking those assets, and you would have the preview. But if you were painting in Painter, you didn't need Maya. And we always had the shader parity in viewport, and we have lookup tables to make sure that what you get in Maya is exactly the same with what you get in Render Engine or Substance. And speaking of masks, I told you that we paint masks and assign materials later. Let's make a use of it. Let's keep the masks, but change materials. And here we go. You have variants. Usually you would have to disable or enable some layers in Substance Painter and then export, or duplicate the project to keep few variants. And those files are sometimes even 16 gigabytes when it comes to Substance Painter. In our case, it was just a single JSON file with configuration, and it helped us creating a huge database of appearances for this living city, but you only had to texture one asset first and create 20 variants in a few minutes. So if you are really interested in that, just search for multi-layer and texturing of Night City, and you will probably find the talk somewhere online. Kuba?
Now we'll say a few words about the way we are working. What values are we following in our work to provide the best tools for our artists? Core values, how instead of why? First of all, we have the refinement. We make sure that every task is well defined and described before committing to it. Second of all, we have the stakeholder focus. We make sure that the stakeholders are informed about the progress of the task at all time. We tend to communicate with them a lot before committing to a task and while doing it. Then we have the user experience. We want the users to always feel taken care of when using our tools. We do it by creating simple user interfaces as well as writing documentation for our tool. Then we have the user feedback. We don't wait for feedback, we usually ask for it. No YOLO pushes. We don't take unnecessary risks because it may backfire for us in the future. A thing that's connected to it is no temporary hacks. It's better to create one solid solution that may take longer than to come back to the code once every 3 months and fix the bugs on the go. Full transparency. If something is not clear for us and we don't like some of the changes introduced by other teams in the code, we are not afraid to communicate that to the right person. And lastly, be agile. We may like or we may dislike the agile methodology, but there is one thing we truly embrace: the agility itself. Don't be afraid of changing rules or the ways you work if you think that the changes may benefit your work. Another thing that we would like to mention is the importance of writing a documentation. On the screen you have one of our tools. It's called Trajectory Tool. What it does, it basically aligns one of the controls in a rig, in a pose, to some predefined values. But it doesn't really matter. The tool was written in 2018 or so, and you have the old tool visible on the left. Recently, we had to port it to make it work in one of our newer projects. And most of the code was unchanged. The only thing that we did is that we added a new big help button visible on the right. And when this button is pressed, a Confluence page with documentation will appear. So you may ask, was there no documentation before? Well, there was, but it was written on a paper. Back in 2018, when the team was way smaller, this solution was fine-ish. Now that we have multiple teams working mostly online, some of them working across the ocean, this solution would not be really convenient. We would have to send these papers by post, by fax, or by pigeons. So why should we document things? It directly affects our productivity and efficiency, keeps a track of progress, identifies areas of risks, and overall ensures that everybody is on the same page. Moreover, when the new person joins the team, it's way easier for them to start working on a documented tool. Telemetry or Greylock is one of our simplest systems that we are using. It can show us which tools are used the most, and which one are not used at all. The tools that are used the most will often require the most attention from our side. It also allows us to see any errors that users encountered while using our tools. So on this daily chart, you can see that our tool that's used the most is the pose library that was shown a bit earlier. So we are gathering most of the events errors with all of the necessary data connected to it. So we have the person that got the error, we have the error itself, the time, when did it happen, and the software in which it happened.
And now let's get back to the first point on Kuba's slide on core values. It turned out that very often we weren't making tools for the users. We had some requests, I need this, I need that system, it annoys me to do that stuff. And we didn't ask enough questions. And after spending 2 or 3 weeks on automating what we thought that was the user need, we would get feedback that they don't like it, or maybe that it is useless. And we had to refine it. And it was a very long process. And in the very beginning of, for instance, creating the remote browser, it was pretty hard to modify the UI to fit their needs. And at some point, they were so angry on us that they started pitching the ideas. But that was actually a great thing. We had a meeting, and our artists cared. They didn't just tell us, make it better. They showed us what they wanted. And they started making mock-ups and presentations. And after some time, we gathered all those in Jira, but we wanted something to manage it in a few-person team and add comments and have it on a single list. So we created a spreadsheet. We negotiated priorities, and we were updating it in that place. Right now, it is different. When we start a task, we never started without proper refinement. And I mean that refinement sets the goal accurately. You have to know what's going on. It's like take a person from another team, and he should or she should be able to understand what's the goal and what are the acceptance criteria. And sometimes criteria is having a button or updating documentation or writing automated tests. Without it and without stakeholder approval, you cannot go further. And stakeholder approval means that at the very end, you will have another call and validate the idea. You may think, all right, what if I did something wrong? Then it means that you probably should have had another meeting in the middle of the sprint. And that's it. And introducing that small change made that artists actually started to like working with us. They no longer complain on the tools all the time, and we no longer complain on wasting our time on implementing something they don't even like. So to sum up, direct communication with stakeholders is a key. It would be also nice if they had a simple way of reporting errors. We have the telemetry, so if you tell me that something is wrong, I can catch your crash. But it would be also nice if you were able to tell me that this button makes me click cancel every time because it's red and it's on the right side, and that's my behavior, so maybe we should change it. And we started creating separate Slack channels, but people often don't use them. That's because when we started working together and they were complaining on some chat, we weren't approaching them directly and fixing the issue. So they started finding people they could approach, and they always had few favorite picks. Someone worked on the remote browser, they go to this person. But what if that person is out of office? So if you struggle with the same thing, start redirecting people to the channel and be active. Some of you may think that it's a simple way, like some person will answer the year needs on Mondays and another one on Tuesdays. But it's wrong, because maybe you have a meeting and it's your turn on this day. I believe that whole team should be answering the needs, and if you are not knowledgeable about the software someone uses, you should just direct him to another person or approach this guy. I know Kuba helped somebody with Post Library, and now they have immediate answer and they know that they are going to get that help. So they are going to Tech Art Help channel or Post Library Help instead of approaching your lead or someone else. And to sum up the most of this presentation, spending 10 hours to make 10-minute task easier is actually worth it. What is important is that you do it every day, and sufficient amount of people does it every day, and it will be great if it's low maintenance and if it can be shared across multiple projects. Because even if now you are working on a simple game, indie, maybe you will be lucky and you will want to make a sequel. So where to start? Many of you are artists. You have no idea how to code, or programmers. You have no idea about creating animation. But that's a good start, because you need those two things and you probably already have one of them. And you don't have to be a super brain, a master of all of that. What you need is to know how to create a simple mesh, put an ugly texture over it, because that means you know what UVs are and so on, and how to put it into engine. You have to know basics of the process so you can talk with your stakeholders without asking them what is what. And then start automating it. If you don't know where to start, there is a book. Books are out of fashion, right? It's called Automate Boring Stuff with Python, and the good thing is that there are 15 videos on YouTube from that book, and the book content is free, but you can also get it on Udemy or somewhere else. If you already know Python, go to Practical Maya Programming. It's a book recommended by my lead. Maybe you don't like Maya. All right. There is a free series by Blender Foundation. Really, this is free, and also that book on Maya, it is also free, because if you give the author your email, he will send you the PDF with some newsletter. Do you prefer YouTube? All right, here are a few channels. Aryan Codes is a guy who makes great tutorials on Python itself and on the code quality. So it's good for you whether you are a programmer or not. The second one, that's auto-promotion. That's my channel, and I spend some time with automating Unreal Engine. So if you would like to delve into Python API, here I am. And the last one is one of our TechArt leads. His channel is TechArt8, and it is not really focused on pipeline. There are some pipeline tutorials, but it's mostly on TechArt itself. Still though, I believe it's a great channel, especially because he has streaming on Twitch. And he may no longer record, but you can see that he is also struggling, and he's fixing those struggles across 1 or 2 or 3 hours, and he's not a magician who knows a solution for every problem. So if you are discouraged because Unreal API is not well documented, or Maya programming is just weird for those who didn't work with such things in the past, it's fine. And we all have to go through this struggle. So it's nice to sometimes see a senior who is spending maybe 2 days on a single line of code. And to sum up, automation is cool, but don't make tools for yourself. Make them for users. Ask them about their needs. Oh, I already said that. All right. Make shareable modules. You will share it across few projects. Maybe you will put it on the marketplace. Keep that in mind. And last but not least, occasionally dream, overscope, and create something awesome. Those tools like Remote Browser or Post Library, at the very beginning, they seemed to be too big. You may think that you spent 3 months doing something and it's not going to be worth it. And sometimes you may be actually right. That's why you have to talk to stakeholders, ask if they can start using it early, maybe use telemetry after you introduce the tool because nobody uses it. But sometimes you just hit 10 and it just works. So that is all. And I will be happy to answer your questions together with Kuba.